Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be doing my November wrap up. Before we get into it, I will mention that there are several videos in which I talk in depth about these. I usually do weekly reading vlogs or I do themed vlogs. There are some that I haven't mentioned in a video, so I'll go more in depth with those. But if you are interested in any of my in-depth thoughts on any of these books, make sure you check those videos out. And don't forget to subscribe if you are interested in watching more content from me. But other than that, let's get into it. So the first book that I read this month was Notorious Pleasures. This is the second book in the Maiden Lane series, and I didn't love this. I gave this 3 stars. So this is about Hero and Griffin, and this is, in the first book, Hero ends up becoming the patroness for the orphanage in St. Giles, and Griffin is a second son, and his brother is set to marry Hero. Griffin finds out that Hero has been traversing through St. Giles, which is like this crime-ridden place, by herself. He blackmails her and says, if you won't tell your fiance, who's my brother, or you won't tell your own brother, then I'm going to do it myself unless you let me follow you around. So she lets him follow her around and the relationship starts. We also are getting a third point of view of Silence, who is the woman currently running the orphanage in St. Giles. And I didn't like this. It was just okay. I didn't really like either of the characters. I felt like Hero was just a kind of knockoff of Temperance from the first one, which I gave 5 stars. So I just didn't really find their romance that believable. I didn't really like either of them. I found Hero to be very self-righteous. And Griffin was just kind of the like stereotypical rake, and he didn't really have anything to distinguish him from other characters like him. So then I started the Mafia romance reads. If you have not checked that video out, I will leave it up here and I will also leave it down below. But I basically read 10 Mafia romances from a Goodreads list, and the first book that I read off that list was King of the Diamonds. So this is about Sandra and Nico is a mob boss. We don't really get a whole lot of mafia elements in it. We kind of just know that he is in the mob. He owns this casino/hotel, and she is a maid there, and she and her boss go up to his level of suites to clean it, and her boss ends up leaving her there to clean up by herself. Nico sees her, thinks that she's doing some sketchy stuff, forcibly requires her to remove all of her clothes. He searches her, and then when she pees herself, he decides to stand in the shower with her. I gave it 3 stars. It's very overdramatic, and there are several scenes where it feels like no real humans interact this way. So then I read Captive in the Dark, and this is a captor-captive romance about Caleb and Olivia. And in the beginning of the book, we see Caleb kind of scouting around for an American woman to kidnap into sex slavery. He's going to train her to get close to this mob boss that he wants to kill. And Olivia is just this innocent girl that ends up getting taken off the streets and kind of hidden away. I gave this 3 stars. I don't really know how to talk about this book because I don't really still know how I felt about it. It was my first like sex slavery captive situation, and I don't know. Then I read Killing Sarai. So this is basically about a woman named Sarai who is introduced to this mob world when she is 14, and she kind of becomes the mob boss's like favorite girl. And so 14 years later or something like that, she manages to escape in the back of Victor, who is the hero's car. Now Victor is kind of like this hitman, and so he is working with her captor to form a hit. As he's leaving, she hops in the back of his car, and he immediately knows she's there, and so he ends up taking her captive to ensure that he gets all of the money from her captor. I gave this 3 stars as well. When I first started this, I thought it was gonna be a 5-star. I loved Victor, and it just quickly went downhill. Plot was both non-existent and like overtook the story at the same time, to the point where when their feelings started being revealed, it didn't really make any sense to me. I read Crow's Row, which I gave 2 stars. This is about Emily and Cameron, and in the beginning of the book, Emily is just this college girl who her roommates are away on holiday, and so she gets the house to herself. She's running in the park one day and she sees Cameron killing somebody. So he takes her captive, and I don't really know what this book is supposed to be. It's obviously captor-captive, but their relationship is very wonky. It just didn't really work. The plot was very, very boring. And then I read Nero for this video. I ended up giving it 4 stars. This is about Nero and Elle, and it's kind of a high school bully romance, but this is essentially about Elle, who is at work one day at a diner, and she witnesses a murder by the hero's family. And so he is recruited by his father, who is the capo, to find out what she knows and possibly kill her if she knows who committed the murder. That quickly turns into like an actual interest for her, where he becomes completely obsessed with her and just wants to protect her at any cause. I really liked this. I will say there is no like distinct point at which the romance becomes him just doing it for the job versus actually being into her. But when I tell you he's obsessed, and all of his friends love her and want to protect her, and I'm very interested in continuing the series. And then the last book that I read for this video was Ruthless People, and this is about Mel and Liam. And I actually gave this 2 stars. So if you're looking for like a mafia fiction book with a light romance, I would check this out. And when I say light, I mean that the first like 10% is about their relationship. It's all about the mafia dealings, and it's incredibly gruesome. The hero and the heroine are incredibly immature. They act like children all the time. They fight like children. So I just wasn't really a fan. If you're interested in my reactions, including 4 other books that I DNF'd for this video, make sure you check it out. So then we'll get into the other books that I read in the month. I read Kingdom of the Wicked, which I gave 2 stars. This is about Wrath and Amelia, and I think this is like a YA new adult fantasy. And essentially Amelia and her twin sister discover at a young age that they are witches. Her sister ends up going missing when they're like 18 or 19. She discovers her body in a morgue, and there seems to be like this weird figure standing over the body. So she goes on an investigation, and I don't know like who this was written for. I don't know like how this made it past editing. And that sounds very rude, but there's nothing here. And I think that Carrie Maniscalco is just not for me. I did not like Prince Ripper Thing, that series. I didn't like that series. I don't like her writing. I don't think she builds anything in the way of character development or plot or anything. Her book is 100% just about the vibes of the area, and I just don't find that very interesting. So I read Fix Her Up this month as well. This is the first book in the Hot and Hammered series, and this is about Georgie and Travis, and this is a brother's best friend story. Travis is an ex-baseball player. I don't know what their national league or whatever is called. So he has had to retire because of an injury. He has come to work for Georgie's brother in his the family's construction company. And Georgie is the littlest sister of 3 siblings, and she is an entertainer. She is a clown, and she wants to open like a full-scale entertainment business, but she has never really been appreciated by her family. They've always looked at her as like the immature little sister, and so she kind of wants to prove them wrong. So she propositions Travis, who needs to better his image, to have a fake dating situation. This was a 4-star for me. I absolutely loved this. The dirty talk of any Tessa Bailey book is just phenomenal. It's out of this world. She's so good at writing dirty talk. The first sex scene in this was I would caution anybody that doesn't like alpha heroes to probably just avoid this whole series in general if you haven't given it a shot yet, but I can understand why you wouldn't really like Travis's personality. But I do talk like in depth about this book in this vlog right here, so if you're really interested in my thoughts. But I really liked this. I think it was great. I'm not really a rom-com person, but I think that it was done very well, and it's incredibly sexy. So then I read There Are No Saints, the highlight of my life right now, and this was a 5-star. So this is about Cole and Mara. In the beginning of the book, we quickly find out that Cole is an artist, and he has an artistic rival, but he also has a serial killing rival as well. And you could kind of compare his rival to like a Ted Bundy-esque serial killer. He's what would be considered a psychopath, someone who is very disorganized, someone who is very impulsive, and he kind of just kills indiscriminately, whereas Cole is a psychopath. So he is very meticulous. He plans out his killings, and they're usually for a reason. And so he goes for people that have messed with him in some way. And the first killing we see in this book is someone who has given him a bad review and praised his opponent. I will say they are like reluctant opponents. His enemy, Shaw, definitely sees them as opponents, whereas Cole just thinks that he's kind of above Shaw. In an effort to get a rise out of Cole, Shaw takes Mara, the heroine, and leaves her as a little surprise for Cole. And the story goes from there. Cole quickly becomes obsessed with her, and this was just like everything I could have wanted out of a story like this. It's so fucking good. Cole is so obsessed with her. Like, the idea of like wanting to live in someone's skin, you're so obsessed with them, is kind of like how this feels. And it's so much, there's so much stalking, and it just was over the top and fantastic. And just like, I feel like Sophie Lark just gets better and better, and I'm so excited for the sequel. I don't want to talk too much about the plot just because it's so bonkers, but I'm very excited, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend picking it up. So then I continued with the series with my reread of Love Her or Lose Her. If you did not know, I read this previously in the year, I think around the June time, and I gave this 5 stars, and my reread, I gave it 5 stars as well. I go way more in depth into this in this reading vlog, so please check that out if you're interested in more thoughts. But this is about Rosie and Dominic, and it is a marriage in trouble story. And again, the dirty talk is sexy. Dom is a deeply personal and relatable person for me. This is just absolutely beautiful and emotional and intense, and I just love it. I think that the balance of romantic comedy and the emotional high stakes situation is done incredibly well. It's probably one of my favorite romances of all time, and it's just beautiful. So then, at the behest of Letitia from Books and Bees, I finally read Kingpin's FOXGLOVE. This is a Polish mafia romance about Konstantin, we're gonna call him Con, and Elena. And I ended up giving this 4 stars. In the beginning of the book, we see Elena, who is married to a member of the Italian mob. Her house gets raided and her husband is killed by Con and his men, who are part of the Polish mafia. He ends up taking her captive and says, "You're gonna wait out here, and then I'm gonna send you back to your family in Chicago." But Elena really has no interest in going back to her family in Chicago, so she strikes up a deal with him and says, "Hey, I see you have this family member over here, appears ill, let me cure her, and then in repayment for curing her, you will let me go and I can be free." And they strike up this deal, all while Con kind of has the idea in mind that he never really wants to let her go, that he has loved her for a long time, and it kind of goes from there. This is a very stationary romance. Elena is in the same spot the whole time, but it is beautiful. I loved it. I loved Con. He is like this cold-hearted Polish man. In the beginning of the book, in the prologue, you see him killing his father with a necktie, and then you go forward and he has horses that he loves, he has dogs, he has a cat. Like, he's a very incredibly loving man. He builds her a library, he builds her a lab, he takes care of his family and loves his family so intensely. And so the dichotomy between his mafia self and his true self is just absolutely beautiful. Elena is a prickly heroine. She's extremely cold and apathetic to other people. I mean, you kind of see her come out of her shell altogether. I don't know if I will continue with the series just because it has some elements that I don't particularly like in romance, but we'll see. So then I continued the Brittle Birthright series by Sophie Lark with the second book in this series, Stolen Heir. Now this is about Miko and Nessa, and Nessa is the sister to Kellum from the first one, and she is a ballerina. She is the sister of the family that everyone kind of feels like is weak, and they shelter her a lot. And Miko is, I want to say Polish. I could be incorrect, either Polish or Russian, I can't remember. And he wants to get back at the Kellum family for the death of someone in the first one. And so he takes Inessa hostage, and this is a captor-captive romance. And I gave this 3 stars. This is probably my least favorite Sophie Lark. I think this was not very strong. I think a lot of the relationship development was done after the book was wrapped up at 75%, and I just didn't really believe their romance for the majority of the book, and not really a lot is happening. So 3 stars. So then I kind of went on a horror marathon, I guess you could say. It's like 2 books. But I listened to the audiobook for Psycho. If you are not familiar with this, it is the book that Alfred Hitchcock got his inspiration for the movie from. And I have seen both the movies, I have seen the TV show, so I'm very familiar with this storyline. It is about Norman Bates, who runs the Bates Motel, and his mother raised him in a very like toxic way. She was very abusive to him and instilled some very disgusting beliefs about women and the world and stuff. And so in the beginning of this book, he has a person who has just committed theft come and stay, and she comes and stays at the motel, and she is quickly murdered. And this is a very short book. I want to say the audiobook was maybe between 4 and 2 hours, and I gave this 3 stars. I am familiar with the story. I think it's been done better in other ways. It's been elaborated on, gone more in depth, that I just think are better than this was. It's very short. I liked it for the simple fact of all of the stories that it has inspired, but I don't think that it was particularly interesting in and of itself. I then listened to the audiobook of Night of the Mannequins, and I gave this 4 stars. I'm not going to go too in depth about this, but it's essentially kids who discover a mannequin and it becomes part of their friend group. They use it for pranks and stuff, and then one of their last pranks that they do with the mannequin before they go off to college goes kind of terribly wrong, and I'm not going to say much more than that. I gave this 4 stars. If you are familiar with Stephen Graham Jones' writing, I think you will like this. I read Only Good Indians last year, and they have very similar creepy, eerie, psychological writing where you just kind of feel deeply uncomfortable the whole time. And I really like this. 4 stars. It was pretty short, and I would recommend if you were just looking for something to like be uncomfortable about the whole time. I then listened to the audiobook of My Dad's Best Friend. This is a daddy kink novella, and it follows Blake and Jonas. And Blake is has taken over for her father at their like construction company or consulting company, and she needs to recruit the help of Jonas to build this house that one of her clients wants built. I gave this 4 stars. It was sexy, you know, stereotypical Katie Robert writing that I really enjoyed, but it wasn't anything like magnificent. So then I continued the Ravenel series by Lisa Kleypas by reading Marrying Winterborn. This was probably the one that I was most excited to get to after reading the first one last month. This is about Winterborn and Helen. And we were teased of their relationship in the first one with some caretaking scenes between the two of them. And the first one kind of left off with them on a bad foot with an engagement being broken off. And so in the beginning of the book, we see Helen going to Winterborn saying, I don't want to break off the engagement. And they kind of know that after the events of the first one, the only way that Devin, who is her cousin, will approve of her marrying Winterborn is if he compromises her. So they go about doing that. I gave this 5 stars. I think it was absolutely beautiful. There is a particular scene that I have dog-eared so that I can return to it. That is gorgeous. It is the scene where they reconnect. I loved this. I loved Winterborn. I loved Helen. Winterborn is a man who grew up poor, and he really like came up from his bootstraps, but he knows that the peerage doesn't really view him as respectable or part of their crowd because he is nouveau riche. He just made his money. He wasn't like born into money. And he thinks that if he marries someone of noble birth, that he will finally be able to like break that crust of society. So he has designs for Helen, and Helen is the oldest sister in the Ravenel group, but she is viewed as just kind of very quiet, and she like loves her plants, but she doesn't really interact with people. She's viewed as incredibly sweet, and so we kind of see them working together. Winterbourne quickly becomes obsessed with her. We got hints of it in the first one with the caretaking scenes, but he finds a sense of comfort in her that he hasn't really had, whereas Helen finds a partner that believes in her, gives her agency, sees her kind of for the fire that she has that might not be as noticeable but is definitely there. I thought this romance was beautiful. I'm very excited for the remainder of the series if this is what this series has in store for me. Lisa Kleypas's writing is just so dreamy and just so easy to get through, so I'm very excited to get on to the third one. So then I read A Lesson in Thorns. This was on my November TBR, and this is about Poe, Auden, Saint, Delphine, Rebecca, and Beckett, and this is a series of basically like pagan sex rituals is essentially what it is. So in the beginning of the book, Poe gets an invitation to go back to Thornchapel, which is somewhere that she grew up when she was a kid. Thornchapel is like being renovated by Auden, whose family owns the place. And he has invited all of his friends to come back and perform specific roles for Thornchapel. The particular storyline with Poe really mostly involves Saint and Auden. Auden is the rich boy. Auden's family owns Thornchapel, and Saint is kind of the poor character. He lives in town. And the other three are kind of side characters. I'm assuming they get their own romances later. I gave this 3 stars. I didn't really find any reason why this was like so hyped, if I had to be completely honest. The majority of this book, I would say 80% of it, is Poe organizing books in a library. Really not much going on. There's some investigation into like the rituals that were performed here. There's very minor investigations into her mother who went missing at Thornchapel. But other than that, there's not really a whole lot. There's a spanking scene, there's a kissing scene, there's a masturbation scene, and then of course the scenes at the end with the actual ritual. But all in all, like, it wasn't anything spectacular. So I might continue, but at this point, I don't really plan to do it anytime soon. And then I finished out the Hot and Hammered series with Tools of Engagement. This is about Bethany and Wes. And Bethany is the person that everybody thinks just has her shit together. She never stresses, she never has anything go wrong, she's always perfect. But on the inside, she is just like this anxiety-ridden person who is terrified of the idea of anybody finding out that she isn't as perfect as she seems. And Wes is this seemingly carefree guy who doesn't really care how he looks. He just wants to make everybody around him laugh, and he is enamored with Bethany. We see them throughout the first 2 books of kind of like this bantery relationship where they say they hate each other and they, you know, trade barbs. But we quickly find out that Wes is just like in love with this dynamic that they have. He finds her incredibly sexy and interesting. And so in the beginning of the book, Bethany and her brother decide to enter into this competition to see who could flip a house better. And so Wes leaves her brother's crew to help her. I gave this 4 stars. I absolutely loved their relationship. I think I loved them more than I loved Georgie and Travis, just because I related to both of them. So then I read A Christmas Date. If I had to be completely honest, I don't really remember anything about this, and that's probably why this was a 2-star. Nikki is in love with her best friend slash sister's fiance, and so for Christmas she hires an actor to be her fake boyfriend, and she's incredibly immature and childish and makes a joke about people with eating disorders. So I then read Kissing Christmas Goodbye, and this is about Lizzie and Max, and this was cute. It would be much cuter as a Christmas movie. It might even be a Christmas movie. Lizzie has a daughter, and she's recently gone through a divorce with her ex-husband, or a separation, and so she is helping her family decorate for Christmas. Now, the whole street of where her family lives, They all decorate, they all deck it out. It's like one of those neighborhoods that everybody decorates and then you can like drive through and look at all the lights and shit. Except the neighbor who is flipping the house across the street, he refuses to decorate, he refuses to let anybody decorate for him. And so they kind of form a relationship. I gave this 3 stars, it was cute. I would like to see it on like an actual TV, just because I think it'll translate better, but it was just fine. So then I read Being Hospitable. This is a sapphic romance between Kiki and Charlie. Charlie ends up moving in with Kiki to like stay for a couple of months, and they had always had like this magnetic attraction to each other, but it is like a best friend's sister situation. I gave this 3 stars. It is hot, but it was just very short, so it was like middle of the road. I could have definitely done with more, but with what I was given, it was a 3. I then read Skin, which was so fucking good. This is about Harbinger and Flint, and they are partners. They're like monster hunters. I think Harbinger is a siren who with skin-to-skin contact can like read people's minds indefinitely, basically, or feel what people are feeling. And then Flint is a gargoyle. Beginning of the novella, she ends up rubbing against Flint's skin, and it's like incredibly overwhelming for her. And she ends up getting laid out in a hotel, but she can feel like this intense attraction with Flint that Flint has for her. And she knows that she has also been attracted to him, and it's fucking beautiful. Their relationship is so sweet that it like made my chest hurt. It was so beautiful, so perfect. I'm so excited for the full-length novel between these two, because Flint's adoration for her is just beautiful. He because he knew of the struggles that she was going through, he wanted her to be aware, very aware of how her body was feeling, so he would hold back all of his attraction, all of his feelings for her, so that she knew that in this situation she's in control, and everything that they're doing she wants. And it just... So then I read Brand New. This is about Quentin and Regina, and I gave this 3 stars. It's a pretty short novella, and it's about 2 people who have always kind of skirted around each other. Quentin is a fuckboy, Regina's not really interested in that, and then they end up hooking up at a party. This is probably, well, this and the next one are probably my 2 least favorite Rosie Adams. I then read Just One More Time, which is about Orlando and Kat, and this is a second chance romance. And Orlando is attempting to get custody of an orphan boy who was Big Brother situation with him. And so Kat is his caseworker, and their relationship sparks from there. I also gave that 3 stars as well. Both of these were just okay. Like, I think that I go to Rosie Adams for like short, believable characters with lovely romances, and I think I was just missing it a little bit here. So both of those were 3 stars. And that is all that I finished in the month of November. Make sure you check out those reading vlogs that I have linked down below. Make sure you comment any of your thoughts of what I read or what you read in November. I hope you really enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. Thanks so much.